In this video, we discuss how and why Mikhail Gorbachev, after nearly 70 years of attempts of the Communist Party to defeat religion, decided to invite it back to public life. In the first two parts of this video review, based on the book by Victoria Smolkin, we discuss how the Soviet government tried to defeat religion under Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev. Now it's time to recap and talk about what happened in the last years of the Soviet era and how the Communist Party abandoned their atheistic project. In the previous video, we covered how ideological indifference, especially among the Soviet youth, became a real problem for the party. However, by the end of the 1970s, a new problem emerged. It was a return of religion to public life. Religion became a vital political agent. In the United States, the rise of the religious right took place, the election of the Polish Pope, the Islamic Revolution in Iran. All these events affected the entire socialist bloc. The Communist Party has realized that religion still has tremendous power for political mobilization. It created the fear that foreign religious vitality would infect Soviet citizens, especially Baptists, Adventists, Catholics, and Muslims, many of whom were concentrated in the border regions. By the way, unfortunately, we don't discuss that much about Muslims in the USSR, who mostly lived in Central Asia or Caucasus region. Maybe this topic requires a separate video. So what the party could do? In 1977, they opened a branch of the Institute of Scientific Atheism in Ukraine, because Ukraine was the most religious and religiously diverse republic in the USSR, and in general was considered one of the most problematic republics for the Soviet regime. The second branch of the institute was established in Uzbekistan in 1980 in response to the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran and Soviet Union's war with Afghanistan. Finally, the third branch in Lithuania was established in 1983 to address the growing influence of the Catholic Church in the communist bloc, and in particular John Paul II's role in mobilizing Poland's solidarity movement, which had politically paralyzed the Polish Communist Party. Another problem was a growing domestic nationalism. The very unity of Soviet society was under the threat. The Institute of Scientific Atheism became central in solving the political and educational problem. In April 1979, Central Committee issued a decree on the further improvement of ideological and political educational work. It explicitly combined atheist education with international education and its effort to address the threat of nationalism. Why it was important? Well, you know what happened in the early 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. For 70 years we were told that we are one family and should live as brothers and sisters under the socialist ideology. Nationalism, however, became its curse. When the opportunity appeared on the horizon, yesterday's Soviet family started falling apart. Nationalistic incentives became one of the major driving forces. It came out that most people in republics like Latvia, Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine, and others were dreaming of independence. They wanted their national identity back, their national language, alphabet, their national heroes suppressed by the Soviet government for decades to get its proper place in their national history. Russia became viewed not as a liberator but as an oppressor that took their land by force and tried to eradicate their national heritage and culture by substituting it with Soviet lifestyle and Russian language and alphabet as superior and dominant. Moscow knew that nationalism revival could cause a lot of problems, but they also realized that nationalistic ideas are often tied to religious identity, as it happened in Poland. Therefore, with that new decree in April, as Victoria Smolkin writes, they noted in particular the importance of ideological work among children who, under the influence of their families, form distorted ideas about the connection between religious and national identity. In September 1981, the party issued a secret Central Committee decree on the intensification of atheist education, which called for the cultivation of atheist conviction in order to fortify Soviet society against alien ideological influences. And probably the most appalling reports from the fields for the Soviet ideologies were those that stated that religion aspired not some marginal individuals or elderly grandmas, but on the contrary, wealthy, educated, and progressive citizens. Reports demonstrated that not somewhere in the villages, but even in Moscow, the capital of world socialism, religion was quite vital. Progressiveness itself seemed to go hand in hand with religious piety. Then we see the young, energetic, reform-minded Gorbachev came to power, and the church immediately expressed its desire to cooperate. On December 17, 1985, Metropolitan Alexei, future Patriarch, sent Gorbachev a letter outlining his vision by stating that the separation of the church from the state does not exclude cooperation between us. From June 5 to 12, 1988, the Orthodox millennium was publicly celebrated in Moscow and across the USSR. A quick historic note. The baptism of Rus is considered to happen in 988 in Kiev, modern capital of Ukraine, by Grand Prince Vladimir. But why is this important? Because the church claimed that the baptism of Rus in 988 was the origin not just of Orthodox Christianity, but of Russian statehood. This way, the church was seen as the bedrock of Russian history and something that has always been with the people. And at first, the party, on the contrary, exposed this myth that Orthodoxy is supposedly the bedrock of Russian culture. However, it changed its mind later. A number of the events took place in important Soviet institutions and attended by prominent officials and public figures, including Gorbachev's wife Raisa. Konstantin Kharchev, chairman of the Council for Religious Affairs, even secured a ZIL limousine to transport Patriarch Pimen to the celebration events. But this was a mode of transportation reserved only for the political elite. Thereby, it became a signal to both the Soviet public and the political establishment itself that a new course on religion has been officially sanctioned. The event was also widely covered in the press and on television. And for many, it was a shock. How come? Since the October Revolution, we thought of religion as a sign of backwardness, something regressive, atavistic, only for backward old women and fanatical sectarians. But now it is depicted as a legitimate part of the country's past and a normal part of its present. What a surprise! Just recently, Gorbachev condemned religion and spoke about the importance of atheistic education. Also, the party clearly did not want to politicize the event and saw the celebration of the millennium of Christianity in Russia as purely ecclesiastical matter. Victoria Smolkin explains how, on the contrary, initially the party came out with counter-propaganda and wanted to reduce public attention to the event. But what happened? Why did they change their mind? Why on April 29, 1988, Gorbachev met with Patriarch Pimen and announced that the state considers the millennium of the baptism of Russia to be a nationwide celebration. Eventually, some even refer to this event as the second baptism of Rus. First one happened in 988, and the second one exactly after 1000 years in 1988. Millions of people came out for celebration, thousands were baptized. Speaking of what might cause such change in Gorbachev's mind, Victoria Smolkin provides details of President Reagan's visit to the USSR a week prior to the Millennium celebrations. Reagan also met with Soviet religious dissidents at the US Embassy in Moscow and visited the Danilov Monastery, the main site of the celebrations. In addition, Smolkin discusses about internal political struggles within the party and specifically the Nina Andreeva affair as the possible cause. For more details, see these pages of the book. In this interview, Gorbachev states that it was his devotion to democratic beliefs that influenced his decision about religion. Of course, the politicians often say and do something for practical reasons. Therefore, it is hard to identify true motives behind such decisions. But the bottom line is that a political decision was made, and the government decided to support the church. For example, after the Patriarch's visit to the Kremlin, Kharchev explained the new party line on religion to his confused audience as a political strategy. He said, "The church has survived and has not only survived, but has rejuvenated itself. And the question arises, which is more useful to the party? Someone who believes in God, someone who believes in nothing at all, or someone who believes in both God and communism. I think we should choose the lesser evil. He also added, "We, the party, fell into the trap of our anti-religious policy. We cut off the priests from the believers. But due to that, the believer did not begin to trust local authorities more. Both the party and the state are increasingly losing control over the believers. As a result, we have the appearance of unspiritual believers, those who fulfill the ritual side but are indifferent to everything, and most importantly, they are indifferent to communism." He also added that for the party, rather than working with such group of indifferent, it is easier to work with a religious believer and make them also believe in communism. Therefore, Kharchev made it clear that, "Sorry guys, I understand that many of you are committed atheists and you would not like such a strategy, but this is a new reality. Put your anger aside and start thinking about religion and the church as a normal part of Soviet life." This was the basic message. In this new reality, the party would be glad for believers and non-believers come together and work collectively on the construction of communism, but it also did not happen. It turned out that now, in order to keep religion under control, the party must be able to educate a new type of priests, loyal to the government. And look what happened next. These backroom maneuvers reveal that even as Gorbachev reversed course on religion, the political establishment continued to see the Orthodox Church primarily as a loyal institution that could be used as a political tool. It was assumed that even once religion entered Soviet public life, the party would remain in control. But by 1989 happened something that would have been absolutely unthinkable before. When the Soviet Union held its first multi-party elections, Patriarch Pimen and Metropolitan Alexei, future Patriarch, as well as nearly 300 clergymen, most of whom were from the Russian Orthodox Church, were elected to the Congress. Can you imagine this? Religion had officially entered politics. But just imagine what this meant for the very idea of communism, because for 70 years they believed that religion should gradually disappear. Otherwise, it contradicts the very idea of communism. What about Khrushchev's phrase that soon religion would exist only in museums? Already in the summer of 1988, in fact, the communist ideology was separated from the Soviet policy. And although many in the party did not agree with this, plus there were many proponents of militant atheism, yet the government turned their back on atheism. Polls showed that 41.4% of those surveyed believed atheist work did more harm than good. 34.3% believed it was useless, and only 24.3% saw any point to it at all. Now it became clear that religion would not disappear soon, and it was necessary to find a way to build relationship with it. Thus, atheist propaganda practically came to an end. Later we see what role the church began to play in politics under Yeltsin, and what roles it plays today under Putin. Today in Russia alone there are about 40,000 churches and about 1,000 monasteries. The government often supports their construction. In 2016, Putin had opened a statue to Grand Prince Vladimir in the center of Moscow near the Kremlin. Some consider it a symbol of rejection of the new world, suggested by Bolsheviks, and desire to embrace the old world. The idea is next: while the West is rejecting Christian traditional values, we Russians are the guardians of Christian values, traditions, and ethics. Today we see how the church stands at the service of the state and became an even greater instrument of power both within the country and in foreign policy. About the different approach toward the church and religion under Putin, please see for example the works of Irina Popkova, in particular her book The Orthodox Church in Russian Politics by Oxford University Press. In this video, on the Russian opposition media channel TV Rain, it tells about the union of the church and the secret services. Gleb Yakunin, a former priest and parliamentarian, talks how the KGB actually controlled the church. In this context, a phrase allegedly uttered by the very same Kharchev is relevant. We have been fighting the church for 70 years. In particular, we made sure that immoral and corrupt people were appointed to the most significant positions. But now we want these people to give us a spiritual revival. I do not presume to comment on this in detail, this is not indicated in the book, but widely referred in Russian media. I just wanted to point to the complex church and state relations in the region. As a result, we see that the Soviet project did not manage to create convinced followers who would self-reproduce its values in the next generations. Eventually, the party gave up its monopoly on the truth. Marxism-Leninism no longer seemed so flawless. Religion was no longer persecuted. It returned to public life, to art, to the media, and began to be portrayed as a positive creative force. But the government still wanted to control it politically. While some religions were considered a norm, other denominations continued to be positioned as marginal and undesirable, for example, Western Catholics or Protestant missions from the US. But the important conclusion for our video is that the return to religion has made atheism itself an undesirable element. After 70 years from the revolution, proponents of atheism had to realize a lot about the essence of religion, about their communist ideology and atheism itself. The Institute for Scientific Atheism was transformed into the Institute of Religious Studies and then liquidated along with the Soviet Communist Party. The journal Science and Religion, which until then had been the main weapon of atheism, instead began to present religion positively. For the Orthodox Church and other religions, it was a victory. They went through incredible persecution, losses, and sacrifice, but they survived. In 2013, the documentary The Second Baptism of Russia was released, where Metropolitan Ilarion talks about this turning point for the Church. Millions of people went to temples. There was an amazing religious revival. The palace of the Soviets wasn't built, and the Cathedral of Christ the Savior was restored to its place. Today you can see there an icon with the image of canonized priests who were executed by the Bolsheviks. For millions of post-Soviet citizens, religion has become a consolation to heal their wounds, especially during the crazy 90s, when the crime rate, alcohol, drugs, suicide rate has risen immensely. The question remains, however, is for how long and how deep this revival was. Current data demonstrates that the percentage of atheists in Russia today is about 13%, but many people claim to be Orthodox just for a cultural reason, with only less than 10% who really attend church, perform rituals and pray regularly. According to the Pew Research in 2017, only 75% of Russians say they believe in God, and only 6% of those who claim to be Orthodox attend church weekly. Sonia Lurman, drawing from Filatov and Lunkin, agrees. Indeed, in post-secular Russia, the choice of religious affiliation is often more politically sensitive than the decision whether or not to be a believer. In surveys, people can easily deny any religious beliefs and still claim to be Orthodox, Muslim or Buddhist, depending on the religion commonly associated with their ethnicity. Basically what we've discussed in the second part, believing in belonging. Norris and Engelhardt, who revised the rejected classical secularization theory and came up with the existential security theory, make a similar claim. In their Sacred and Secular, they demonstrate analysis by Need and Evans, Baravik and Karianyan, who all conducted a study of the post-communist society and claim. Adherence to the Orthodox tradition rose in the short term immediately after the fall of communism, but the study found that commitment to the church and the level of religious practice are as low today as in the most secularized Western European societies. Today's Russia is very much a secular country, with high-ranking church officials stating that the church lost the opportunity after a temporary revival in the 1990s. And now it is nearly impossible to restore that moment. Priests often complain that the church has lost its authority, especially in the eyes of Russian youth, and that over 90% of their parishioners are elderly women. But on the political spectrum, the church still plays a significant role. Let me remind you once again that the most materials for this review were taken from the book A Sacred Space is Never Empty by Victoria Smolkin. At the same time, I did not share even 10% of the information that it contains, so please read this amazing book for more details. Soon I plan to make a video book review on Ronald Inglehart's Religion's Sudden Decline, published in 2021 by Oxford, where he introduced the theory of evolutionary modernization and argues that it is not correct to attribute secularization to the progress of scientific knowledge or modernization in general. After all, this implies that secularization is a universal and unidirectional process. But what is Inglehart's response to this, you'll find out in the next video, so please subscribe and press the bell button for notifications. Consider supporting me on Patreon or by a one-time donation. Stay tuned, there will be many interesting reviews ahead. And finally, thank you for watching until the end.